all you want to know about Xi visiting Moscow and how it'll affect the world. During a recent foreign leader's visit to Moscow, he had an informal meeting with Putin yesterday. Today, the two leaders met again, but their meeting was overshadowed by a devastating explosion in Crimea. Russian cruise missiles were destroyed and the country's Black Sea Fleet was hit. This is because the missiles were designed to launch from those ships. While Russia claims it was a drone attack, Ukraine's defense ministry has confirmed the explosion but has not taken responsibility for the attack. If it's proven that Ukraine was involved, it would be a significant escalation. The attack was daring, as it occurred deep inside what is now considered Russian territory. It's important to remember the timing of the strike, as the Chinese president is currently in Russia with a peace plan. Xi Jinping presented the plan to Putin yesterday, and Putin responded positively, stating, "We have carefully studied your proposals on setting the acute crisis in Ukraine. You're also well aware that we're always open to the negotiation process. We will discuss all these issues, including your initiatives." However, things may have changed since the Crimea explosion. After the blast, Putin had formal talks with Xi Jinping, during which they likely discussed Beijing's 12-point peace plan for Ukraine. Putin has always spoken riddles, stating it will not be giving any assessments. Let us wait for the statements from the media. This brings us to Xi Jinping's peace plan and what China wants. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video as we dive into this topic. All right, let's go. The recent explosion in Crimea has cast a shadow over the ongoing peace talks between Russia and China. While Putin and Xi Jinping discussed Beijing's peace plan, it remains to be seen how the recent attack will affect the negotiations. China is advocating for a ceasefire in Ukraine and urging both sides to engage in peace talks. Although they have not officially declared it, China's statements in the press reveal its desire to oversee this process. While the goal is noble, there are several obstacles that China must overcome. Firstly, Ukraine may not agree to a ceasefire because it would result in a loss of territory for them. This would give an advantage to Russia, which may not be acceptable to the West. The U.S. has already expressed concerns about the proposal, suggesting that a ceasefire would benefit Putin and allow Russian forces to remain in Ukraine. The U.S. believes that a ceasefire would give Putin more time to regroup and strengthen his forces. Therefore, any ceasefire that does not require the removal of Russian forces from Ukraine's sovereignty territory would essentially legitimize Russia's illegal land grab. Despite these reservations, President Zelensky of Ukraine has expressed a keen interest in talking to Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two leaders have not spoken since the beginning of the conflict, and reports suggest that a virtual meeting may take place soon. While the official dates have not been announced, there's a lot of buzz surrounding the potential call, which would happen after Zelensky visits Moscow. China's efforts to facilitate a ceasefire and peace talks in Ukraine are admirable, but there are significant challenges to overcome. The U.S. and Ukraine are concerned about the potential ramifications of a ceasefire that leaves Russian forces in Ukraine, and it remains to be seen how China will respond to these concerns. The question posed is why Ukrainian President Zelensky is eager to engage with China despite potential pitfalls. However, the answer is simple. Why not? There are compelling reasons for this decision. Although Chinese investments may be a trap in the long run, they can aid in rebuilding a country ravaged by war. Furthermore, pushing CCP away could result in its increased support for Russia, potentially leading to the sharing of more military aid, even lethal arms. As a result, Zelensky may want to at least establish communication to avoid these outcomes. Additionally, Zelensky is not known for being steadfast in his principles, as he is willing to work with anyone who provides him with financial and military support. He has even partnered with Pakistan. Therefore, Chinese investment would be welcome, as the Ukrainian president has not criticized the Chinese proposals. He has dropped hints that he would like to discuss them. The question remains, can Zelensky influence Chinese outcomes? And more importantly, how much importance would China place on Zelensky, especially when Vladimir Putin is on the other side? Xi Jinping's recent visit to Moscow leaves us questioning whether he'll be able to change the course of this war and play peacemaker. The decision to engage with CCP may come with risks, but the potential benefits are too great to ignore. It remains to be seen whether Zelensky can influence Chinese outcomes and if China will prioritize his interests over Russia's. While the world is hoping for peace, many are also betting on the failure of certain countries. In this case, let's talk about the connection between Ukraine and Pakistan. Western powers play the role of matchmakers, and the result is that Pakistan is now the latest country to pledge tanks to Ukraine. According to reports, Pakistan will send 44 T-80 tanks to Ukraine along with 10,000 rockets. However, the sudden show of support does not indicate a change of conscience on Pakistan's part. Rather, it's an attempt by Pakistan to appease the West and keep the United States happy. Pakistan is going through a crippling economic crisis and desperately needs funds from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). To pave the way for bailout funds, Pakistan is trying to portray itself as a Western ally. Islamabad has had a long history of military cooperation with Kyiv since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Between 1991 and 2020, they had defense contracts worth $1.6 billion, and Pakistan brought around 320 T-80 tanks from Ukraine. Pakistan's recent report for Ukraine is just a return of some of the tanks they have received earlier. Pakistan is also facilitating Ukraine's Western allies, such as the UK, by allowing them to use their air bases to send military equipment to Ukraine. Additionally, Pakistan's sports industry is being used to ship containers carrying arms. These containers arrive in Germany and Poland and are then sent to the front lines in Ukraine. Pakistan provides air and sea routes for arms and military equipment, making it an invaluable ally to the West. Perhaps it's even an ally that the West cannot allow to fail. This brings us to the question of why this support is so crucial for their relationship with the West. China has shown hesitancy in increasing its investments in Pakistan, leading to the halt of some of its infrastructure projects. These projects were part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, and the delays and attacks on Chinese assets have caused frustration. Pakistan's Gulf allies have also become tired of their sporadic aid promises. It's not wise to throw good money after bad, especially when it doesn't benefit the Pakistani people. Unfortunately, most of this aid is taken up by the military. Now, Pakistan is turning to the West for aid and is using its military stockpiles to appeal for it. While it may be a decent move for Pakistan to prune its armed forces, the West's bailout may not be a wise decision. Pakistan has a history of playing a double game, as evidenced by its harboring of Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. The West gave Pakistan $31 billion in aid to fight the war on terror, but in return they received body bags and a Taliban regime in Kabul. The U.S. is partnering with Pakistan again to fight the war in Ukraine, which is a cause for concern. The U.S. has just released its animal human rights report, which covers almost every country in the world, including India. The report highlights Russia's war crimes in Ukraine, Iran's crackdown on anti-hijab protesters, China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, and the Myanmar military's atrocities. However, the report reeks of hypocrisy and shows that the U.S. still sees itself as the sole superpower, stuck in a time warp. The section on India is almost the same as last year's report, with paragraphs lifted verbatim. The only new criticism is about the bulldozing of homes. Most countries are likely to reject the report released by the U.S. State Department just like last year. This begs the question of why the report was made at all. This is not some arbitrary report, as it has the government stamp of approval and is a report on all countries receiving American assistance and all United Nations member states. These reports are legally required to be submitted to the U.S. Congress under the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 and the Trade Act of 1974. Essentially, American law mandates that they sit in judgment of the world. The accuracy of these reports depends on who you ask. For example, Saudi Arabia is a long-standing ally of the U.S., but has not been towing Washington's line lately. The U.S. uses human rights records to bring Riyadh back in line. However, for a country that has appointed itself as the class monitor in human rights, how does America's record look? You won't find the answers in this report because the U.S. chose not to include itself. Ideally, India or any other country should release a report on human rights in the U.S., but they don't go beyond the occasional word of condemnation. Therefore, we have decided to do the honors themselves and provide a report on human rights in the U.S. Let's start with the most recent controversy. The Biden administration wanted to share details of Russian war crimes with the International Criminal Court, but the Pentagon blocked it. The reason behind this was the fear of setting a precedent for American war crimes to be investigated in the same court. This fear is not unfounded, and it makes one wonder how horrific the U.S. military's actions have been over the years. Speaking of the U.S. military, the world is again discussing the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, which devastated both nations for 20 years. A viral video from 2020 shows a U.S. war veteran confronting Joe Biden about sending them to harm civilians. When we focus on human rights, the infamous offshore torture chamber operated by the U.S. in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, comes to mind. The images of abuse that emerged from this facility shocked the world. Despite America's promise to shut down Cuba's detention center, it remains operational. The facility is located in Cuba because such cruel treatment is prohibited on American soil. However, the U.S. government still conducts such activities in Cuba while conveniently omitting them from their human rights reports on Cuba. This raises questions about the reason behind such secrecy. The mention of torture brings to mind the infamous Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, where locals were subjected to appalling acts of torture that sent shockwaves around the world. This was a clear violation of human rights, and the images that surfaced served as evidence of how little America values such rights. However, justice for the perpetrators was lacking, and many high-ranking officials were allowed to go scot-free. It begs the question of why there isn't an annual report on the issue. Additionally, there is a deeply ingrained culture of racism and police brutality in the country. The issue of gun violence is a terror in itself, with teenagers more likely to kill than terrorists. The frequent occurrence of school shootings highlights the need for action to be taken. Furthermore, there are dystopian gender controls such as the restrictive abortion laws, which blatantly disregard human life and dignity. The U.S. is free to make its annual human rights report, but these reports serve no purpose in addressing any of these issues. It appears that the U.S. government is instead weaponizing human rights, and this is appalling. The blatant hypocrisy reeks of the U.S.'s disregard for the very values they claim to uphold. Well, thank you for watching to the end. Please do like and subscribe. It's important to us. Peace.